right. Get going in just a minute here as I get organized.
Good morning, everyone.
There we go. I'll be able to see people. All right. So we are venturing into polyvagal world, and now we have hit the trauma and addiction. And I have to admit, I don't want to say I was disappointed, but I guess, this is my specialty. And so maybe I expected a little bit more. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add in anything that I might know about trauma and addiction, especially the neurobiology. I hope everybody's okay with that. But as far as, the polyvagal information is excellent. And addiction and polyvagal are very much related, because when we're addicted, we're literally activating the disconnection of pain, emotional and physical pain, which is exactly what dissociation does. So if you have a behaviors or a drug, alcohol that numbs you out, you're basically utilizing the same type of strategy that your parts are using when they activate the dorsal vagal shutdown or the red zone. So that's kind of interesting. All right, so let's get going here. Like I said, I'm still kind of messing around here with my screen. And here we go. Okay, you ready, Roxana? You good for me to start?
Yes, recording is in progress, and
Okay,
we're
awesome.
good to start.
Excellent. All right, so welcome everybody. We're here at our polyvagal world with Stephen and Seth Porges, How Safety and Trauma Changes Us. We are on chapter 6, which is very exciting. We're like more than halfway through the book. And so there'll be some political stuff at the end. I might ask Seth to jump on and just explain it himself, but we'll see. We had to change the video that Seth has put out there for the polyvagal. I think it was a 28-minute video that has been circulating for years. It had some political humor and it was funny at the time, but now given our current political environment, we can't use it. So we went in and just edited it. So know that that particular video is on my website, and maybe Roxana can just put that into the chat, just so you have the video that's edited. It's got the president jokes taken out of it, because it's still just an absolutely priceless video. All right, so we're going to move in. Trauma is defined by how our nervous system responds to it. And so that's basically what this whole book is about. We talk about how safety is our intervention, because if we're not feeling safe, if we're not feeling secure, we've got nowhere to start. And now especially, and I am going to be making this kind of sarcastic comment more so than that, now our environment is very terrifying. And so this is going to be more important than it's ever been. In fact, one of the things that we focus on with Polyvagal World is the introduction of the red, yellow, and green states. Like, I'm very happy that there's now a book that I use it so much it's fallen out of my book. But it's basically using the trauma traffic light, and that's what we've been using for years now. And so when this book came out, I was very relieved, because I got the trauma traffic light from Seth and Stephen to begin with. So, but now we have, with our current environment, we have a new light. It's going to be the orange state. So when you think about a trauma traffic light, we're going to be looking at green, yellow, orange, and red. And orange is going to be the combination of yellow and red. And that's what we are experiencing. We have our clients that are coming in and they're super anxious, but they're immobilized. They're super upset, and their polyvagal or their sympathetic nervous system is activated, and yet they're shut down at the same time. So in other words, and excuse me, I am going to swear right here, but it's a shit show neurobiologically. Corey, I see you. And so we have a double bind, and you've heard of double binds, but we've got a double bind basically internally with the cortisol and the adrenaline, which is the stress hormones. And then we've got the endorphins, which are activating the opiate receptors, which is going to be our numbing. And it's all happening at once. And we need to put language to that. And we're just going to call it orange. So we haven't hit what it really is called in the book. Maybe it's a blended state. but I want to give it a name because I'm going to be working with it and referring to it on a regular basis, because it's, once again, it's got a different response for therapists on how you work with it. So, okay, but let's move into our chapter 6. So chapter 6. So trauma is defined by the nervous system response. So in other words, we're teaching our clients how to move into their bodies and interpret how they're responding. We've got either a PTSD, which is going to be a single event, which is really kind of hard to find these days, or we have multiple events. The multiple events are going to be our complex PTSD, in that it's a chronic, inescapable. Generally, when you're a child, your attachment rupture, there's no safety. And so the multiple events are considered complex PTSD, but we don't have an actual diagnosis for that in the DSM-5. So we call it PTSD with a dissociative subtype. And that dissociative subtype is your dorsal vagal shutdown. That dissociative subtype is dissociation, which is your red. So if we're going to be working with clients that have just a PTSD, we're pretty much looking at a sympathetic response, a fight or flight response. But when you're looking at a multiple event, chronic trauma, and like I said, it generally was before the age of 7, before the pandemic. But now with the pandemic, and especially what's happening now, I wouldn't be surprised if we see an explosion in complex PTSD numbers that are no longer being initiated in childhood. But we'll see. And then the lingering impact on one's safety. The nervous system can stay in survival mode indefinitely. And that's going to influence how a person perceives danger in everyday life. We talked in prior chapters about the reptilian brain, the brainstem, which is right here, going back 500 million years. And then we talked about then the mammalian brain, which is going to be the limbic system, where you have your emotions and you have your amygdala. That's 250 million years ago. So we're talking about systems that have been around for a really long time. So if that survival mode kicks in, it could be there to stay. And so we need to help our clients understand when they're shifting in and out of these really important aspects of our central nervous system. Humans can become triggered by anything. We talk about the 5 senses. You can be triggered by a sight, a sound, a smell, a taste. You can be triggered by just an emotion. So when we're doing our EMDR basic training, we talk about the components of a memory. And when we're looking to target a memory, we can target anything. So I talk about my kiddos that were in the hospital, and their father was passing away due to organ shutdown. And when we went in to process the trauma, we would just target the smell of the room. We could just target the sound of the machines, or the feel of his skin, or what they saw, with the blood that was dripping out of, I don't need to get into detail, but the point is, but you have very, very specific triggers, and those triggers can be anything, and it just needs to be one of them. One sensory trigger can activate the whole memory, and all of our memories are stored either verbally or non-verbally. And so if they're non-verbal, if they're implicit, they're stored in our body, and they're stored without language. So you can be triggered by a smell, an entire memory that you don't even remember, and you wonder why you're acting the way that you're acting. Well, your autonomic nervous system has kicked in, and it is protecting you. So you could be in a dorsal vagal shutdown 500 million years ago in reptilian brain and not even know what it is that put you there. But that's what polyvagal is teaching us. That's what Stephen is teaching us, Stephen and Seth, in this book. Really just getting down to the basics. It's trauma-related reactions, control, that autonomic state. It is unconscious, and it is outside of our conscious control. It is outside of our control. And then staying in one of the states, if it's the hypervigilant state or the dissociative state, which we refer to as yellow, which is our hypervigilant, sympathetic, hyper aroused state with cortisol and adrenaline and an increased blood pressure and increased heart rate, or the red, which is the dorsal vagal shutdown. It's a parasympathetic response. It's an unmyelinated shutting down. The body is preparing for death. So you have a drop in heart rate, and you have a drop in blood pressure, and you have endorphins that are activating the opiate receptors, which is numbing. See, I told you I'd add some stuff. That's what I know. And so, but the key is that, and I'm just going to throw this in every opportunity I get. When you have yellow and red together, you have orange, and that's where we are today. A lot of us are right there today, where our body is preparing for death, and we're super furious about it at the same time. And so we have that, that confusion that I referred to earlier, the double bind, the neurobiological double bind, or the physiological double bind. So staying in the red and the yellow for long periods harm our ability to access green. And green is our ventral vagal. It is our dual attention. It is where we want to be in order to do the work that we need to do. Co-regulation challenges. Trauma makes it difficult to access safe social engagement. And yes, and yet social connection is crucial for healing. So when we start our work, we now engage in what's called secure your space. It comes from Jim Knight. And basically, we can't do any work whatsoever, especially online, until we know that our clients are engaged in a moment of security. So is it their favorite drink that they have? Is it that they have their phone right next to them? Is it because they have their water bottle? Is it because they have a tattoo that they're attached to, or jewelry, or they're wearing their favorite clothes or slippers? We need to figure out what it is that helps our clients feel secure. Safety is our intervention. And so we really want to be assisting our clients with anything and everything we can that involves connection around internal security. So their parts are feeling secure, right? When we talk about social connection, we're not just talking about with people, we're talking about our internal parts as well. But then also, are there fellowships? Are there places that people can be going in order to be in connection? Are there places where they feel safe? Their nieces and nephews, or going to church and going in for coffee and donuts, whatever it is. We really want to be helping our clients engage in that. And then over time, anything associated with traumatic events then become a source of distress. So even people that we are cherished, even people like, our grandmother, who was so lovely, and then we lost them over COVID. So we've got COVID, and then we have this connection with COVID and losses. I think our clients saw a lot of that. And so when those losses are triggered, we're experiencing loss right now. How much grieving are our clients experiencing as we see this new political environment start to unravel? And how is that affecting prior grief that they've experienced? And how can we put language to that? And then knowing how feeling unsafe impedes that emotional well-being. So psychoeducation, empowering our clients with what is safe and security looking like. I don't use the word safe. I find that triggering, but security I will use. A moment of security. What does that look like? And how hard it is to relax, how hard it is to connect, and how hard it is to heal. And with that being said, I would just like to stop for a minute. I'd like for everybody to just we're going to do a little bit of a polyvagal exercise. It actually comes from Havening, which is one of my favorites, but I'd like everybody to put their hands together. And I do find this beautiful. I don't do yoga, but at the end of the day, this is just so peaceful. And I'd like you to really put those palms together. And I want you to feel that interaction with the palms, because basically you are activating your proprioceptive, I forgot the other word. Anyway, it's delta waves. And delta waves are calming. Delta waves activate security for us and get that ventral vagal going. And so that pressing of the palms is the key. And then I'd like for you to do something that's going to be present time oriented. I just want you to touch your pinkies together, tap your forefinger together, tap your middle finger together, tap your pointer finger together, and then tap your thumbs. And just look around the room and identify 3 rectangles. We've done this before. Don't have to point at them. Recognize 3 things that are brown. And then we're going to take our hands and lightly shake them out. And then just do a nice breath in and a long breath out. And I hope that you can feel, I hope you can notice that downshift in our autonomic nervous system. So the polyvagal theory suggests that humans have more than one stress response. And it's true. That's something that came out of, we were working with Daniel Siegel's window of tolerance, and then we shifted into polyvagal very quickly. It's in this chapter that Stephen Porges says, you guys out there in trauma land, I had no idea how important this research, this work that I'm doing was going to affect the work that you do. He says that he's humbled, and at the end of the day, we've globbed onto it very quickly. I think I've mentioned before, when I went to the last EMDR conference, I was shocked at the polyvagal language that was just like integrated into everything, and how people are assumed to understand. It's assumed that they understand the language, and the language can be complicated. But it suggests that humans have more than one stress response, right? We've got yellow, which is our fight flight, and we have red, which is our shutdown, our freeze dissociation. And the two of them are very different. While many focus on the fight flight, the freeze is something that we're spending a lot more time on. And at the end of the day, your body is going to shift in and out of these, and it's not going to necessarily let you know about it. It's unconscious. It's called neuroception. It's one of the three principles of polyvagal. And our neuroception basically is going 24/7, especially for those clients that have experienced a lot of trauma. That neuroception is kicking in all the time, assessing your environment for danger. And there is so much danger. So this is so important that we're able to talk to our clients about this, and that we're looking at the animal kingdom as examples of how this has evolved. Feigning death, or playing possum, or flop and drop, also another thing that we call it, is seen in reptiles, rodents, and then many other animals illustrate how shutting down can serve as a survival mechanism. I think the example that Stephen uses is, if you have a mouse that's in a cat's mouth, and the mouse feigns death, the cat will lose interest and just throw it down. And also, if the mouse does die, it won't feel the pain that it would originally feel, because of those endorphins that activate the opiates. That's a really important part of this. If our body is preparing for death, and it's creating an environment where we're not feeling pain, why wouldn't one want to dissociate? And oh, by the way, yes, that's what we talk about when we talk about addiction. It's basically activating the same thing, except for now a person has control over it, conscious control over it. So people experiencing trauma may freeze, dissociate, or shut down, often without conscious control, much like animals. And that immobilization, or that red response, has historically been overshadowed by the emphasis on activation. It used to be fight, flight, freeze. Fight, flight, freeze. And then, was that freeze an intentional freeze with sympathetic energy? Was that freeze a shutdown going into red, that parasympathetic dorsal vagal shutdown? Well, it doesn't matter anymore, because at the end of the day, we need to separate them out. So you have your sympathetic yellow, and you have your parasympathetic dorsal vagal break, a shutdown red, and that is going to be dissociation. And once again, when you have both at the same time, which is what I'm seeing every day now in my office, just recently, it's orange. And I know that orange has been around for a long time, and that a lot of people have felt this way for a long time. But, depending on where you work, it hasn't been so apparent as it is now. And then the trauma implications in that acknowledging the freeze and dissociation response is very key to understanding the traumatic stress and what the body is experiencing. Has anybody ever heard of the default mode network? Because the default mode network is really an important aspect of the brain that is what engages dissociation. And this is something 2025 is going to be huge for, as far as I'm concerned. But if you can keep your clients out of the default mode network, you can keep them out of a dissociation. And do you know how you do that? You do that by activating the CEN, which is the Central Executive Network. Now, you don't need to know anything about what that means, other than you need to know that is EMD 2.0. All right, EMD 2.0, working memory taxation. You're going to start hearing about it more, because we need it. It's really important as an EMDR basic trainer, when I teach that we have 3 different action mechanisms for EMDR, that it's super important that you understand there's a huge difference between bilateral stimulation, utilizing REM sleep bilateral to activate the corpus callosum, which activates the right and left hemisphere, which is attached to the body to get that natural healing process of the brain. That's one. But that working memory taxation is completely different in the brain. And it does completely different things. And yes, it is part of EMDR and the action mechanisms, but working memory taxation is what we need now and today. And so if you go in to do your standard protocol, and that standard protocol could activate a lot, because that's what standard protocol does. The longer the bilateral, the more memories that come up. But working memory taxation is a very safe way to work with our clients that are in red. Okay, I'm going way off the book. Sorry, Stephen. Sorry, Sal. And so I threw in the differences between the trauma responses. So like we have two people that experience the same traumatic event. And there's a lot of research around 9/11 talking about how the children, when they grew up, how they had experienced 9/11 differently. And so that's an important aspect of the work that we do, because only one might develop chronic PTSD symptoms. One might have a PTSD and one might have chronic PTSD. And chronic complex PTSD is going to suggest dissociation, which is red. PTSD is going to suggest sympathetic, which is yellow. How do we work with them? It's very different. So then you've got your immediate versus long-term effects. Not only do people differ in long-term trauma outcomes, but their acute reactions also vary, which is what I just spoke to. I threw in Dr. Frank Anderson's chart that talks about the various traumas. And I just like to point it out because I use this in my advanced trainings. PTSD, once again, very different. One-time criterion A event, then complex PTSD, where we're talking about relational trauma, repeated interpersonal violations. And it can be so extreme that you're working with dissociative disorders. And that's something that us trauma therapists have to know how to diagnose, how to recognize, and how to work with. Doesn't matter what orientation you use. And so we've got the involuntary response. Once again, we've got that neuroception. So it's not something that you're going to know is going on. And then how our response is largely outside conscious control, and it's governed by autonomic reflexes that's shaped by the individual system's dynamics. So what did that person experience throughout life? And how has that been encoded? How is it encoded in the brain, and how is it encoded in the body? We have neurons throughout the brain and the body. And so it's, if we can give our clients language if we can help them understand what it is that they're experiencing, that's going to be half the battle. We always say half of change is acknowledgement. So let's help our clients acknowledge what it is that they're experiencing it and where it came from and why. The human nervous system acts as the intervening variable, meaning it filters and processes experiences difference in each person, differently in each person. So a variable is something that changes. The variable is going to be different given the person. So when we do, like, for example, the polyvagal worksheets with our clients, we're helping them map out their autonomic nervous system and helping them understand what it is that triggers them. It's powerful work because it empowers them with knowledge around understanding what they're experiencing. Examples of real life situations. Of course, I had to throw the Highland Park shooting in there because I was very much involved in that. Highland Park's right up the street from me, and I worked with a good amount of clients from there, and I did the crisis work, and I learned a lot from the situation. So the Highland Park shooting illustrates how in a shared traumatic event, some individuals responded with yellow and some red, and I could give perfect examples to that. I went in and I did crisis work at the high school, but I also took in a number of clients, and I had a handful of clients that it was a PTSD for them. They came from a good enough family environment. They came from a good enough attachment. And this was a PTSD one-time criterion A event, a horrific one. And they were, and I do not lie, they were out the door in 8 sessions. 8 sessions, seriously. And they are doing great because one of them's married to my other client, and the other clients, and they definitely give me permission. You can get on Facebook and read their stories. The other client who's had a lot of trauma, not to go into the detail, but really, really significant pre-verbal trauma, basically dissociated through the whole thing. I had another client that literally walked back out with the shooter at large to get her phone because she left it on the bench. So I saw firsthand yellow and red. I also saw that with yellow PTSD, they were out the door in 8 sessions, just like EMDR promises. But with complex PTSD, they are still working with me. And we're 2.5 years out, almost 3 years. Okay, so big difference. And what is the DSM diagnosis code? You've got the PTSD diagnosis for the one that was out in, say, 8 sessions, and you have the same PTSD diagnosis code for the other one, except for now you have with a dissociative subtype, which means that there's a lot going on with their autonomic nervous system that we need to focus on. And you bet that polyvagal was the first thing that we did. So Seth's experience that he writes about in the book is about when he was in Paris for the terror attacks. So I'm not going to go into much detail on his experience, but the energy and adrenaline that he experienced, he talks about it in the book. So if you want to read it, it was really what kind of woke him up to the importance of his dad's work. You know, they got an interesting relationship. He is an actor. He is a director. He's a comedian. And, you know, we all know how serious Stephen is. So understanding trauma and resilience. So first of all, defining trauma. Trauma is less about the event itself and more about how the nervous system reacts. So the nervous system is going to react based on the history. What is encoded for the client? Did they have a traumatic birth? Were they neglected in the crib? Did they have trauma when their mother died at the age of 5? Were they a kid that lived through the pandemic? We don't know what that looks like. And you can be sure that if they lived through the pandemic and they're too young to remember it, that they definitely were picking up on the energy of their parents who were very clear on what was going on during the pandemic. That resilience is defined as the capacity to face challenges without being overwhelmed to the point of long-lasting trauma. And so we're looking at how our nervous system is wired. We're also looking at how our brain is wired. So once the beauty of the polyvagal is that we EMDR therapists, for those of you that are, we have the adaptive information processing model that basically is here. And now we have the autonomic nervous system, which is basically down here. And the two together are our central nervous system. So at the end of the day, we need to know about both. And that clinicians note common clusters of symptoms, but that yet again, no two people experience PTSD the same. And this is where it gets confusing with PTSD with a dissociative subtype. Do you know how many combinations there are out there for a dissociative subtype? Like, just give me the World Health Organization, PTSD or complex PTSD. 2 different codes, 2 different treatment strategies. They make it so confusing here in the United States. And yet this is going to be the diagnosis that's going to be coming in for almost every single client within a year, probably. So treatment variability, different approaches, different results. So, you know, he talked about Walter Bradford Cannon, and this is one of the reasons why I like reading these books and doing these book studies, because I'm like, okay, who's this guy? Who's Walter? You know, when did he come up with fight flight? Oh, it was World War I. Oh, by the way, tell me a little bit about World War I. My brain's, you know, a little rusty when it comes to history. It's always fun. You guys are like, oh, that's fun. But it is fun when I'm spending time doing these slides because I can go in and really learn a lot about the situation. And so Walter Cannon, he basically coined fight flight during World War I. So that's going to be the 30s and 40s. And that's where fight flight freeze came from, basically. And so if you want to learn more about him, go for it. And then also his concept of homeostasis and what that looks like. So we want to know what our, you know, when we're working with our client, we want to know homeostasis isn't the word I want to use. It's our, it's not going to come to me. It will in a minute. But when we look at window of tolerance, thinking about Daniel Siegel's concept, we want to know how our clients, what their window of tolerance looks like. Everybody's going to be different. And so we want to know how we can get our clients into their window of tolerance, what that looks like for each client, And now with Polyvagal, we really have language to help our clients map themselves and be able to measure what it is that activates them when they go from 0 to 10, maybe with anger in their yellow state, or when they collapse and go into their red state and end up on the couch where they can't move and they're scrolling for hours. We need to put language to this. Name it to tame it, says Daniel Siegel. And naming it to tame it turns out to be a really powerful thing if you were at my training on Friday. So, and then each person's window of tolerance is unique, like we said. The window, leaving the homeostasis, but baseline. That's what I was looking for. Trying to figure out what our client's baseline is. That's kind of the name of the game. And then figuring out how to work from there, because everybody's baseline is going to be different. Roxana, how are we doing? I need to check and see how I'm doing with time. I haven't taken a breath, I think, since I started.
We're doing well. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I haven't seen anything in the chat, but if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat. And or if anyone has a question and would like to.
How's it going?
I
Just put
think we're
something
good.
in the chat. What's a takeaway so far? Just one
Yeah,
takeaway.
one takeaway.
I know I talk fast, but you can, it's free. So you can just go listen to the recording.
Can I ask
My
a
goal is-
question that's not necessarily, I mean, like it is polyvagal related, but it's something you said about like EMDR and oh my gosh, why am I forgetting the word?
That's okay. Just go for it.
Porno?
So Paula did my basic training with you and a lot of my consultation hours with you, but then I did a consultation for my certification recently with somebody outside of EMDR Chicago and outside of EMDR Consulting. And they were surprised that I, in the phase 3, asked for like any picture, smell, sight, like any of it, because often other folks, like the consultant was like, oh, like when we do our basic training, it's just a snapshot. And if they can't come up with a snapshot, then is when we would move into, okay, is there a sound or whatever? And I just was like, no, this is how I was trained, is that we ask for anything. And so just didn't know where that discrepancy came from. If this isn't,
I think that using the parade is a perfect example, or using the example of my kiddos that were with their dad when they passed. Yes, Francine uses picture and snapshot. And also we can use smell, taste, what you hear, because with the parade, we had to focus on the gunshots. And there was no visual. I mean, there was a visual later of the glass everywhere and the shrapnel and the pain, but it was a sound. And so it really depends on what the client needs. So does that answer your question, Kristen?
It does. Yeah, it's interesting. Like the consultant was like, I know, I'm pretty sure it's a Francine thing that you just asked for the snapshot. And I was like, okay, like what? But you're saying obviously because we have all those other senses and sometimes.
Yes, they're all part of memories. And so, and as you recall, the first slide we have in the basic training for the neurobiology is all of these things feed into our memories. Now, why do we do a snapshot? I say snapshot of the worst moment in the training is because we want to fractionate and titrate as much as possible. So if you have a picture, that's going to be your best bet. And that's why we do that in the training. But when you're working with your clients, obviously, like what I said, the first point of disturbance for those particular clients were going to be the sounds of the bullets. And so that's what I'm going to focus on first. Yeah. Good. Nice question. I like that.
And
all right.
Paula, on some end, they're saying just appreciative of the PBT language for helping folks to understand, talk about, and take actions related to their distress, including ongoing political distress being experienced by all my clients. And golden nugget from the 2.0 training: trauma isn't just psychological, it is physiological. My client really identify with that.
Excellent. Good. I just posted, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Richard Shevitz, but he was one of the first people that I met when I moved into working with complex trauma. And he came to Chicago and I work with one of his, I don't know, he's her mentor. And so he put out beautiful post in my listserv last night, and I asked him permission to post it. I put it in LinkedIn and I put it on Facebook, on my Facebook page. I'll put it in my other Facebook pages. He just really spoke to what's going on in our world or our country right now, and just named so much. And I told him when I emailed him, I said, I'm still, my prefrontal cortex is not online. I can't put words to what I'm experiencing yet, but he did a beautiful job. So if you really want to see somebody who speaks to what we're experiencing and what our clients are experiencing, find it. And if you can't find it, let me know and I'll send it to you. All right, I'm going to jump in and keep going so I can stay on task here. So measuring resilience, the text raises the question of whether we can quantify measurements, and resilience can be partly measurable, but it's complex and influenced by the physiology, the psychology, and the social factors. I did recently have a conversation, Farnsworth Lobenstein, who I work for and co-present with. We were talking about how I do spend a lot of time focusing on heart rate. I find it interesting that Stephen Porges started this work with babies and studying heart rate variability, and how you've got the increased heart rate for the sympathetic nervous system. You know, you've got a heart rate above 100 beats per minute. You've got an increase in blood pressure. You've got that stress hormone that's mobilizing you. You've got this amazing amount of energy. You can feel alive and stressed. And then we have the red, the dorsal vagal, with a significant drop in heart rate. And I'm a numbers girl. Like, I came out of business school. I actually, math was my major for a while. You know, I worked in interest rates. So numbers really speak to me. But what Farnsworth reminded me is that it's really physiological. It's about how it shows up in the body. And I think that that's especially the case now, because as we talk about this orange state, the heart rate's all over the place. It's very chaotic. Our bodies are very chaotic because we have red and yellow energy that's all happening at the same time. So I just want to kind of honor this slide for that, because I'm always on a learning journey. I'm not going to let go of my heart rate variability, but I will honor both. Let's just put it that way. So the term stress is often used both for external, I'm dealing with stress, or I feel stress. And from a polyvagal perspective, stress is not just an external trigger, it's your internal nervous system as well. And it's messing with that baseline, that homeostasis. And so that's why window of tolerance is so important. We can't do trauma work unless our clients are in their ventral vagal, safety is our intervention, window of tolerance. That's what dual attention stands for. And dual attention is the cornerstone of EMDR, and it's the cornerstone of any trauma therapy that you do. I just added this because this is one of my favorite charts that we put in our packet when we're looking to do polyvagal mapping. And the interesting thing is this is a trauma response chart, but you know, we have a task, and our task is, how are we going to get orange in there? Because this is a really important place that we're going to be working on now. And this is, personally, I find that the best way to work with this is internal family systems or any type of parts work, because you need to work with the dissociative part and the sympathetic part at the same time. And you need to honor them both separately. And then you need to put them on the couch together and get them to work together. And that is just a beautiful way of really honoring what's happening in our bodies. So more to come on that, because that's my next move in psychoeducation. So here's our heart rate variability that I was referring to. Stephen's early interest with newborns, and the variation in intervals, looking at the heart rate and how fast it goes up and comes down. That's how he found this third state, because he was measuring sympathetic and he was measuring hyperarousal. And then as he was watching the heart rates, he realized that the heart rates were dropping below resting to some significantly low levels. One of my clients who wears her Apple Watch 24/7 has a range at work of 170 to as low as 50 or 60. And her resting rate is about 78. So she is definitely in red and in yellow, yellow and red all day long, up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's, I mean, that's exactly what she was like when she walked in my door. And I've never had a better understanding of what she is experiencing internally until I learned this. So I'm just so grateful. So he says, think of it as a slinky. You guys remember the slinky. If it can expand and contract easily, it's less likely to break under strain. So this is, just looking at another way we could understand heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is now widely recognized and measured in wearable devices like your Apple Watch. And research shows a strong correlation between a high heart rate variability and better outcomes. So it just means that when your client gets activated, its return to resting is faster than somebody who has a lot of trauma, because returning to a resting rate might not even be an option. I'm not going to go into great detail, but that's what that aspect of the chapter is about. And then resilience as body wide, not just mental. Once again, we are honoring the body, and that's not a surprise to a lot of you. So, we're framing the resilience as a physiological system throughout the body, not just mental. And being an EMDR basic trainer and being an EMDR consultant, I do a lot of work with the natural healing process of the brain. I understand a lot about the neurobiology, understanding the difference between what happens when you do a bilateral versus a working memory taxation versus present time orientation, which is the 3 action mechanisms of EMDR. But here we're talking about the autonomic nervous system. So when you think about the central nervous system, it's here and here, and the communication between the two and what that looks like. And so I am very grateful for the language that we've been given so that we can make those connections and really integrate this into the work that we do from a trauma perspective. So let's see here. Traumatic incidents can wear down the resilience over time, making it harder and harder to return to that baseline, returning to that homeostasis. And then by contrast, positive social interactions like play and supportive relationships can bolster that resilience, which I'm sure that doesn't surprise you at all. Trauma pushes us out of homeostasis, right? It pushes us into yellow, it pushes us into red, limiting our ability to heal, grow, and restore. Once again, honoring the book here. I know a lot of this is review, but that's okay. When we cannot return to our window of tolerance, the green, long-term physical and psychological consequences can emerge. And so, I get a lot of therapists that come to me. I do a lot of consultation, a lot of teaching, and they'll say, my clients have no idea what green is. I love it when they say they think smoking weed is green. And I go, well, you know what? We call it fake green for right now, because maybe that's all your client has. So green is a challenge. And the way we deal with green, and Deb Dana did a really nice job. She calls it glitters, whatever it is. It doesn't work for me. It's a little too foofy, but moments of green, moments. So biting into a burger, a touchdown, a warm day, walking outside, getting hit with a breeze, your cat climbing into your lap, purring, your dog greeting you at the door, moments of green. That's where we have to start. And when you think about it, moments of green are moments of being present. And the opposite of being present is being dissociative. So if you have a highly dissociative client, you start with moments of green and then you take it from there. And it works beautifully. It really does. Throw that in there with the polyvagal feelings chart and you're good to go. So people differ in how they process and recover from stressors. And it's a mistake to dismiss someone's trauma simply because it wouldn't affect us the same way. I think we all are pretty good with that. At the end of the day, it isn't about what happened. It's about how you responded. He uses Sopranos as an example. So I pulled a picture, but media and public figures sometimes minimize and mock survivors. We see that all the time. And this can be very cruel and alienating for individuals. And so many trauma survivors, like Tony Soprano, Seth is in there right in this book too, fear appearing weak if they admit that their struggles leading to suppression or denial. So bottling up trauma can fuel anger, aggression, sadness, and poor physical health. And so there you have. I didn't even watch the show, so I don't know what happened. If he healed or if he died, no idea. Trauma's contagious nature. So trauma and a constant sense of danger can spread within families, communities, society at large. And so when we're looking at danger in our communities, danger in our country, danger in our world, danger that's multi-generational, transgenerational trauma, we have to take it all into consideration. I find a lot of times I'm asking my therapist, like, did you check to see what the client's birth was like? Was there birthing trauma? Was there trauma when they were in the womb? Do they have trauma, that goes back generations? Like, we need to take all of this into consideration when we're looking at our clients' trauma, when we're mapping their autonomic nervous system. And then acknowledge harmful patterns and how our own experiences might affect others, recognizing that admitting trauma or harm is difficult, but crucial to moving forward and regaining resilience. And I can say that personally when I work, talking about my kids, right? I had 4 kids. They're not going to hear this. It was traumatic. That's all I can say. It was freaking traumatic. And it was the hardest job I had out of all the jobs. And I had some pretty interesting jobs before I became a mom. And at the end of the day, I have a lot of accountability that I have to take. I don't like it, but it's hard and it's important. And it's important for the healing of relationships. And, it is what it is. So maybe, obviously, that's why I'm in this business, probably. Frank Anderson would say that's why I'm in this business. So safety is essential for healing. Feeling safe allows us to form close, positive social bonds. So where do we feel safe? Who do we feel safe with? What do we need to do to create safety? What does our green zone look like? What does it look like here? What does it look like internally? And what does it look like externally? When I do parts work, and I know that we have polarized parts all over the frickin' place. The more complex trauma you have, the more polarized parts you have. That's the first place we need to go and work. We need green internally. We need our parts to just respect each other. They don't have to agree. So if you have a part that drinks and a part that says you shouldn't be drinking, they don't have to agree. That they have to understand and respect each other. I understand why you drink. This world's really painful. And I understand why you tell me I shouldn't drink because I'm getting a second DUI and I might lose my license. We both agree to disagree and we understand each other. And that is called validation. I hear you, I understand you, I get you, I see you. And this is couples therapy, basically, with our polarized parts. So that's a beautiful place to start with green, because we can't do a whole lot about our external environment right now, but you can, and you do have access to all of the turmoil that's going on internally, and we can create peace and beauty within. We have the tools for that, and that's going to be our focus. Once again, kind of getting off Seth and Stephen's topic here. All right. Trauma makes it hard to trust and feel at ease with others. So this can block the release of oxytocin, which supports emotional bonding and healing. Oxytocin is a really important, oh boy, is it a neurotransmitter or a hormone? This is my learning recently, but we need to figure out how to engage, how to incorporate more oxytocin in our life naturally. So harmful attachment patterns, intense fear can create strong but unhealthy bonds. Abusive and manipulative relationships may falsely promise relief from fear, but don't lead to true healing. I think that that's why gaslighting has, the language of gaslighting has really become so popular, because it really helps our clients understand how just being in a relationship can be abusive and having them be able to recognize that. People often use substances to change how they feel, especially when stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. Substances can bring temporary relief, but do not address the root trauma. So I think this is where, like, kind of my disappointment with this is supposed to be called trauma and addiction. And there just wasn't really, this is the first time substances are brought up. And we're like, kind of like halfway through the presentation. Hopefully I'm doing okay on time. Yeah.
There's a beautiful comment saying kangaroo care has been shown, which is skin-to-skin contact has been shown to significantly decrease mortality among preterm babies and decrease the time they spend in the NICU. This is a neurophysiological sense because skin-to-skin care is quintessential ventral vagal activation for infants.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's called kangaroo care.
Yes, that was
Uh,
Cynthia.
Oh, of course it was Cynthia. Hi, Cynthia. Cynthia teaches me more than I teach her a lot of the time. I'm just honored to have her. So, oh yes, I love that. That's beautiful.
I can
That is
speak to that as a parent too. I had a preemie who spent time in the NICU, and we did a lot of kangaroo care, and he was discharged before his due date. And I mean, like, the kangaroo care, I think, was like invaluable to that. So
That's so awesome. Kristen, was that you?
yeah,
Yes, thank you. That's really neat, especially when somebody can put an experience to it. Thank you.
absolutely.
yeah, and
And
then
that's everything that we've got. This is the type of we're going to need more of that, right? And we've got to figure out how to provide safety and security for our children, and so we can start with what we have right here. Excellent.
and then they
Yeah.
also said thank you for your vulnerability, helps to validate. And Cynthia also said that oxytocin is a peptide hormone and a neurotransmitter,
Okay, it's
and you're so
both.
kind.
Uh-huh. I knew. Okay, good. Thank you. I was like, I didn't want to get it wrong. So try to be as transparent as possible. So it's both. Excellent. Yeah, and like, my learning is moving more into understanding the changes in brain structure and the neurotransmitters and the hormones when we are working with trauma, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what orientation we look like. It's all in the neurobiology. So I appreciate that. All right, let's move on. Can we move on, or you got anything else, Roxana? All right, because you know me. So this reminds me of the class that I took when I was getting my MSW, uppers, downers, and all arounders. I don't know if any of you guys read that book, but downers being benzos and opiates, and uppers being cocaine and amphetamines, and talking about when you are in a sympathetic response, you are at an increase in heart rate and an increase of blood pressure, and that a downer is going to calm you down. And then the opposite is for when you are in the red, when you are in that dorsal vagal shutdown, and your heart rate and your blood pressure, you're preparing for death, that a upper would be able to pull you out of that state. And whatever your diagnosis is, I think it's important. I think this is where I kind of glob onto heart rate, but whatever your diagnosis is, understanding like how we're reacting to it, how our bodies are reacting to it, where our heart rate is, and then knowing how the medications that we take influence can be very helpful. And I made a really quick comment. I'm not going to go into detail here, but Daniel Siegel has a video. We show it in all of our trainings, the basic training, etc., about name it to tame it. And he talks about how his foot's in science, and that all the research that they've done for years and years and years basically is summed up with name it to tame it. He talks about when you name something, when you link, bind, or connect a nonverbal experience with language. So that's what this polyvagal book is all about. Nonverbal experience. My stomach is queasy, my heart is beating, my face is red. With language, oh, you're in your yellow, you're in your sympathetic, your heart rate just went up, your blood pressure went off, you've got cortisol and adrenaline pumping through your bloodstream, your HPA axis is activated, yada, yada, yada. You just put language, name it to tame it. Daniel says that there are neurotransmitters that are literally, he goes like this, squirted onto the amygdala. And the amygdala hijack is the key. Well, I looked it up. I'm like, well, you can't just say that. We got to know what it is that's being squirted on the amygdala. Well, without going into too much detail, it's basically related to benzos. So who the frick wouldn't want a benzo? So if you as a trauma therapist are spending your time helping clients put language to their nonverbal experiences, you're basically calming your clients down to a point where they are able to utilize, a natural way of calming themselves, as opposed to taking something like a Xanax, which is, very, very popular in where I live. So anyway, I just had to throw that out. So addiction is a coping mechanism. From a polyvagal viewpoint, addiction often represents the body's attempt to self-regulate when it can't find safety. All right, so that's like the most important line in the whole chapter. When you can't regulate, when you cannot self-regulate, and think about all the children that go through, for whatever reason, the inability to self-regulate, that their body is going to try to find the way to do it. Now, children that are experiencing trauma early in life, they learn how to do it by dissociating. All right. That's why dissociation, at least in the old days, starts before the age of 7. That's why dissociative subtype is part of the PTSD diagnosis. That's where complex PTSD comes from, finding that ability to dissociate. But guess what? Drug use and behaviors that numb you are also identical to what dissociation does. It is a numbing or separating from emotional or physical pain. So it's the same thing. So if we're going to work with addiction, we want to work it with it the same way we would work with any type of trauma. We need to look at the dissociation as a symptom and figure out why we're dissociating. We want to look at the addiction or the behavior as a symptom and figure out why we are medicating. Same thing. And in my world, a lot of that's answers are coming from just the parts work that I've been doing, but there are a lot of ways that you can do it. So our negative feelings, threats, loneliness, despair often come from being stuck in a dysregulated autonomic state. So they're literally stuck. And how do we get out of being stuck? Through interaction, social interaction. Social interaction that's external, but also internal. We can't forget the internal parts that we want them to be getting along. We call it our inside family. We want our inside family to be healthy as well. And a lot of times they'll tell you that you can't be healthy externally until you're healthy internally. So, we've got some work to do. And then if we can't self-soothe through healthy social bonds, then we're going to seek other ways to do it. And those other ways to do it, you can do it through temporary shifts through drugs and alcohol or behaviors, or maybe you're really good at dissociating and you're just going to shut down because it's literally the same thing. So addiction as state regulation. People who choose downers, opiates, benzos, when they're anxious and need calming, or uppers like cocaine and amphetamines when they're shut down and need energy. So it makes sense. These drugs literally assist. So not implying anything at all, but there's a really good reason why ADHD medications that have this ability to increase heart rate, increase blood pressure. There's a lot of other things going on, but it can bring a client out of what feels dissociative and shut down into a place where they can feel more engaged and be able to pay attention. But just understanding how that works, I think, is really important for us therapists. Addiction emerges because the substances only work briefly, leading to cycles of tolerance, withdrawal, and more use. And then there's the shame cycle. So feeling guilty or weak for using substances adds another layer of pain, and it pushes people to continue to seek relief. Recognizing addiction as an attempt at coping removes self-blame and opens the door for healthier solutions. And we have slides coming up where Seth speaks specifically to the types of shame that our clients can be experiencing and how Polyvagal can give them language and information that will assist with them understanding this isn't something they're choosing to do. This is something that's protecting them. So a history of threat and abuse can make us misread friendly singles. So if you are someone who has been experiencing danger through a lot of your life, you're not able to pick up on what would naturally be inviting and friendly and considered safe. And this creates even a bigger pull towards substance use for relief because you're not picking up on what it is that people have to offer or finding, especially when we talk about how addiction is in isolation and recovery is in community. There's a reason why smart recovery and 12-step rooms are important. It's a fellowship and you learn to trust and you learn to connect and you learn to be with like-minded people. And that really, at the end of the day, is what we do need. And so, whatever your fellowship of choice is, it doesn't matter. It's about being with people and learning to integrate them. When you look at the 12-step rooms, for example, if you need a guaranteed sobriety, because let's say, you're in big trouble with the law, 90 meetings, 90 days in a row. Why? 90 phone calls, and they say you've got to call your sponsor 90 days in a row. It's not about calling the sponsor. It's about the connection. It's about the brain pathway. It's about doing it 90 times in a row, because that's about how long it takes to create a neural pathway. And so it's, when my clients say, oh, I don't think I like my sponsor, they're not in tune to me. And I'm like, it has nothing to do with the sponsor. Just call them, just reach out, text them, do whatever you got to do. Go have coffee for 20 minutes. It doesn't matter. It's about creating the ability to reach out and to connect, because our clients can't connect. Okay, off topic again. Polyvagal informed treatment, focus on safety, creating environments where people's nervous systems can relax and heal. What is it that creates a sense of security in your environment? What is it that you need? Do you have a candle you want to light? Do you have lotion you like to use? Do you have a fake fireplace you can turn on? And then we want to encourage the understanding of our defense states so that people can understand why they're there, how they got there. Once again, name it to tame it. It reduces the fear. And that safe environments, people withdraw from, when they withdraw from substances, that it's important that they have these environments, because their body is going to be going through a withdrawal. Not only are they going through a withdrawal of the substance, whatever that substance is, or the behavior, but also you're withdrawing their ability to dissociate. Because most likely, I want to say 85%, at least in the research, is that you came from complex trauma to begin with, and you were dissociating until you were 12, 13, 15, 18, and you got introduced to weed, or you got introduced to alcohol, or you got introduced to porn, or you got introduced to scrolling. Well, I can't even go down that road. But at the end of the day, it's dissociative. And so instead of waiting for your autonomic nervous system to dissociate whenever it wants without letting you know, because it's unconscious, now you can consciously activate your own dissociation with whatever these behaviors are, because that's what the red state is. And so the first line of action is finding out where the safety is, where the security is, and so we can get that central nervous system calmed. So these are some questions that Seth put out there. I'm doing a time check. 30 minutes. Going to be right up against the edge again, you guys. I always do this, don't I? So this section uses polyvagal theory to clarify why trauma causes certain reactions and how it reshapes our body and mind. So Seth went through and he just basically put some questions out there, and I just summarized the answers so that I'll just read them so we can kind of go over them. At the end of the day, if you read the book, this is to help you kind of pull it all together. If you didn't read the book, this is supposed to be there to let you know what the book was about. Maybe you don't need to read the book. I love the idea of exercising. Michelle's getting a great workout in while she's listening. She's getting great bilateral going, which is awesome. So I love the use of time here. And so let's see what Seth was doing here with his question. So one question, why these are questions that are going to come from like clients, for example. Why did I freeze or dissociate when I was assaulted? Does that make me complicit? And then the answer, freezing or dissociating is an autonomic response governed by red, our shutdown system. The body may shut down or dissociate to minimize harm or block out reality. It is not a choice, nor does it imply that you were complicit, that you were a wanting anything or a part of anything, or that you were agreeing to anything. At the end of the day, it's really important. It was or unconscious. And when it's unconscious, you are basically at the mercy of your autonomic nervous system. So that can reduce the shame. Why does everything look, sound, or feel different after my trauma? Answer, your autonomic state filters out sensory experiences. When we feel unsafe, our senses can change dramatically, leading to numbness, altered taste, smell, negative associations with previously enjoyable things. We find that when our clients are struggling with depression, or they just had a very traumatic experience that then activated prior traumatic experiences. The numbness is going to be those endorphins that activate the opiate receptors. There is a release into the bloodstream of a numbing so that things are not as vibrant as they usually are. And that's an important thing for our clients to understand. Why do I hear things differently after trauma? So Stephen does a lot of work with safe and sound. So the muscles in your middle ear shift when we're in a defensive state, tuning our hearing from low frequency, threat related, tuning our hearing for low frequency, threat related sounds. So if we remain stuck in yellow or red, this ear adjustment can persist and cause sound sensitivity or difficulty picking up human speech in noise. So one of the things I learned is that Disney music is within the frequencies of the safety, and that when you go outside of these frequencies, you're either in a low frequency or you're in a high frequency, you can pick up on, and it's fight flight, or it's going to be a shutdown, yellow or red. And that some of our clients live there, right? Because everything is a threat. And so, it's once again, this can, is it tinnitus? I don't want to mispronounce it. Anyway, the ringing in the ears. There's connections. We want to see if helping our clients understand more about frequencies and how their brain interprets frequencies, that once again, empower our clients with knowledge. Why do certain things trigger my trauma? The nervous system learns from painful experiences and associates specific sights, sounds, colors, or people with danger. So, for example, my supervisor that I see once a month said she was giving us an example. She had a client that was very triggered by red. And so whenever in the beginning, she wouldn't wear red into their sessions, but then she started wearing a little bit of red and talked to the client about how she was going to start integrating red into the outfits that she was going to be wearing. So at the end of the day, this is a really important way for us to, once again, understand our clients. And we want them to know that it's not a weakness, that it's the body's way of avoiding perceived threats. Why am I always so anxious? Trauma can tune the nervous system to constantly searching for danger. So there's that neuroception, constantly tuning. I always talk about my dog experience. People are probably so sick of my dog experience. I got bit by a dog when I was young, and I have a lot of windows in my place. And whenever there's a dog, there's a new puppy next door, darting around either window, like I immediately I'm like, oh my God, there's Lucy. Oh my gosh, there's Fred. And so it's still there. And sometimes I think I don't work on it so I can use it to teach. But at the end of the day, we are in tune. Our neuroception is working 24/7. Why was I so shaken by an event that someone else shrugged off? And here we are again. Everyone has different levels of resilience. I had a conversation with my mother last week, and maybe it was the week before, and it had to do with some things that were going on in Chicago. And with her response, I immediately said I had to go, and I didn't talk to her for a week because she was interpreting what was stressing me out completely differently. And instead of being judgmental, I tried not to be. At the end of the day, it's really important for us to be able to, I don't agree, I agree to disagree, and figure out how to stay in relationship, even though we have different reactions, different levels of resilience, depending on what triggers are. That's something that we have to hold for ourselves when we're working with our clients, right? And we want to be able to impart that onto our clients as well. Why do I have a hard time socializing and making friends after trauma? Trauma disrupts the ability to feel safe around others, making socializing and forming healthy relationships very difficult. Unfortunately, this creates a vicious cycle because Safe social bonds are a key way to heal from trauma in the first place. I struggle with this. I think we're missing something big. I know that there's another person who talks about shame a lot and how important the external environment is. I get it. I get that we need to be in connection, but Frank Anderson nails it when he talks about working with internal family systems, and it doesn't matter what orientation you want to use, but you have to find peace internally before you can go out and connect externally. And what Frank says is, a lot of our clients find so much peace internally that they want to stay there because it feels so good and they feel so independent and they've never felt this type of safety before. And that we as therapists have to help them. We have to nudge them out into the world to then start to create those social bonds. So that part of this is true, but there's never any language about the work that we need to do internally with our parts. And that's why I'm a huge advocate for polyvagal, parts, and EMDR, because all three of them basically work so well together. I don't think you can do one without the other, to be honest. Okay, why does trauma last so long and why is it so hard to treat? That's for all of us. Trauma is often viewed only as a psychological issue, leading to talk therapy or medications or other types of treatment. While these can help, trauma also involves the entire body. So that's why we're here. We're looking at how the autonomic nervous system, or the central nervous system, autonomic nervous system, my bad, how these chronic states of feeling unsafe, what that looks like, and how we can be working with and empowering our clients with the language in order to be able to, put language to the experience, name it to tame it, as Daniel would say. So we're going to finish up with the end of the chapter. Basically goes into, what does it go into? Talking about the types of tools that we can use to regulate, things that we can start thinking about integrating as opposed to some type of addiction, which I don't know, it's helpful to a certain extent, but when you work with addiction, it's a lot more complicated than that. But this basically is talking about how, although not originally focused on trauma, the theory has offered a new lens which we can look at and the body. And so this comes from that other chart, basically talking about when you're in red, when you're in yellow, and when you're in green, your body, your physiological changes are pretty significant. And so it's a great place to start as far as getting our clients engaged in what it is that they're experiencing. And the worksheets that we've put together to go with the book that we can use with our clients and with Seth's video is very helpful. Putting language to what each state is, what it's like for the client, how they experience it, and then being able to map the psychoeducation around what's literally happening from a neurobiological experience. So decoupling feelings from trauma, the aim is for clients to experience challenging sensations without automatically reliving or blaming the trauma. So that's where the naming to taming comes in. If we can put language to our experience, we can literally separate it out from what it is that activated it to begin with. And then over time, these physical states become simply part of our human experience rather than triggers for past horrors. And that comes into play for addiction, because at the end of the day, if you want to work with addiction, we need to find the root cause. And the root cause is the trauma. And then we want to separate that out. We talk about this in the EMDR basic training. AIP, past present connection, 20-80 rule. 20% of what you're experiencing is about today. 80% of that comes from the past. What are we medicating? Well, we're medicating the 20% with our addiction. And where is that coming from? The 80%, which is coming from our touchstone or our root cause. So there's really a lot of great ways to look at this that makes sense. And then we've got to figure out how to integrate all of these tools to help with the healing. So breath and movement exercises help clients shift their autonomic states, moving in and out of discomfort safely. That's kind of a basic statement. This practice fosters confidence and resilience, like guiding a ship through obstacles without crashing. I think that this section was just kind of, like, yeah, okay, we got this. Clients practice feeling difficult emotions, gradually increasing the duration while maintaining a sense of safety. And this comes from the 12-step rooms. They've got a lot of great mantras, but you feel, you deal, and then you heal. So I thought that was appropriate here. You feel and move on would be how they put it in the book. Rather than erasing the emotion, the goal is to recognize it, to name it, to then move past it. A lot of ways that we can do that, especially with Siegel's Name It to Tame It. And then common symptoms across diagnoses. You've got anything. We're going to be moving into some of Stephen's work, thinking about like auditory hypersensitivity, the difficulty extracting human speech from background noise, flat or diminished facial expressions. All of these things are connected to the vagus nerve. Lack of vocal reciprocity, difficulty regulating behavioral and emotional states, higher heart rates, reduced vagal regulation called vagal tone. A lot of Stephen's doing a lot of work with the neurodivergent folks and working with safe sound and safety. I'll get to it, whatever it is that he's got. I'm blanking on it because my brain's somewhere else. But many of these shared issues link to the body's social engagement system. And so when stuck in a hypervigilant autonomic state, the system struggles to process social cues effectively. And so that's pretty powerful. That means that we've got really some interesting ways that we can get in there and work with some of our clients' symptoms. The goal is not to cure individuals, but to improve their quality of life. I like that. That neurodiversity movement emphasizes that different wiring is not inherently problematic. Rather, suffering arises when symptoms become overwhelming or disruptive. So we can get in there and start working with that. We can start working with that from a polyvagal perspective, understanding what the vagus nerve does. Sensory and autonomic hypervigilance can be evolutionarily adaptive. So yeah, we talked about like going back millions of years. If your client experienced trauma, that would be a great place to start. Not necessarily working on the trauma, but looking at how the autonomic nervous system and polyvagal could assist the client with some of the symptoms. Once again, that name it to tame it. Excessive vigilance can cause significant distress and limits one's ability to benefit from safe social connections. Well, this excessive vigilance, like we're entering into a whole new and different era of that. And so we want to be thinking about how we're going to be shifting some of our work that we do. Certain features were once deemed innate and unchangeable. So the auditory challenges in autism, for example. And this is from Stephen's book. This is not necessarily where I stand on this. So according to polyvagal theory, some of these symptoms may improve if the nervous system finds a safer baseline. Here's my word, baseline. So by reducing hypervigilant and increasing signals of safety in one's environment, individuals may experience fewer disruptive symptoms. So basically, how can we do that? And that's something that Stephen's really put a lot of time into. It's, let's see here, it's going to be coming up in a minute. What he's looking at is he's taking his core principles, the physiological states, the green, the yellow, the red, and looking at how a client experiences, how when you're experiencing trauma, that it can basically keep you stuck in these different states, which, we know as a trauma therapist. And then looking at ways to increase safety and security, restoring that sense of safety, knowing that sense of safety, that safety is going to be our intervention. It is going to be our treatment plan in the beginning. And then going beyond that and giving psychoeducation associated with the green state, growth and restoration. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Who is it that we're working with? Are we working with children? Are we working with adults? Are we working with couples? And utilizing the main principles of polyvagal to create that setting. And then I just wanted to get to this, the safe and sound protocol. And we will have a couple minutes. I don't know if anybody has looked into getting certified in this. I had a couple therapists that did and found it very difficult to manage with a private practice because it's something that you have to do every day. But the Safe and Sound Protocol, there's a Facebook page that you can join on Facebook if you're interested in it, but it's specific interventions derived from polyvagal theory. It addresses the auditory hypersensitivity, PTSD, chronic pain, anxiety, depression, and more. And it uses modified auditory input. So you literally listen to something 20 minutes a day to shift the nervous system toward a state of safety. The people that I have connected with that have used it say that it is very helpful. Once again, I think that it's really difficult for a therapist that meets with clients once a week to incorporate it into, like, let's say a private practice, but maybe agencies would have more access to it. So I'm just curious, we're going to stop here. If anybody is working with Safe and Sound Protocol, if they have anything they want to throw in there, somebody that might know more. I didn't take notes on the whole section. There were a couple pages. So I thought that maybe somebody out there would have something that they could speak to around actually utilizing it. So Roxana, anything coming up?
We had someone that had says the Safe and Sound Protocol when you couldn't remember the name. And with the neurodiversity, suffering also arises when settings are inequitable, designed to meet the needs of the neurotypical people. That was by Cynthia.
Wait, read that again. Can you read that again?
With neurodiversity, suffering also arises when settings are inequitable, designed to meet the needs of neurotypical people.
Okay, I think I need you to send that one to, or it'll be in, we can talk about it afterwards. Okay, all right. And is there anything else? Is there anybody that uses this or knows anything about it? Like I said, I had a number of therapists get certified and then they found it really hard to integrate.
No
Okay.
comments.
It sounds great. I mean, literally, like you literally listen to something 20 minutes a day. And basically it's working with those muscles and the frequencies that you're picking up on. Because if you're in a hypervigilant yellow state on a regular basis and your neuroception is constantly activated, you are hearing from a different perspective than somebody who's not. But that's all I can say to it. All right. Any questions or thoughts? We are skipping next month. And so we will be meeting again on April 7th. We've only got 2 chapters or 2 meetings left. I'm going to try to get Seth to come in and say hi for one of them. And so we'll be finishing up the book in April and May. I think May is our last group. So anything coming up, Roxana?
Nope, I'm gonna stop.
Okay, good.